Well, it's here. It's finally here after years of campaigning. It is here. And I am very interested to hear what people have to say about this movie. I think this movie is going to surprise a lot of people, but it could disappoint many fans due to them building up this idea of what this movie would be over so many years. I personally thought this movie was going to be nearly a completely different thing to what I saw because I had heard so many things over the years. But personally, I'm not disappointed at all. I am pleasantly surprised by what we got. But first things first, I should probably state where I stand with Zack Snyder and the DCEU in general. I was never really a huge fan of Zack. I had a lot of respect for him and knew that his movies had a lot of fans. And I was never really one to say that Snyder was a bad filmmaker by any means. Although I have joked about his style in the past, it was never malicious in any way. It was more just me messing around. All that being said, I just kind of accepted that Zack's style of filmmaking and his movies in general just weren't for me. I thought they were loud, abrasive, and over-the-top edgelord fest without any real substance. To me, at least, it never felt like there was a heart there. A lot of the time, I felt that certain movies of his also had a lot of like pseudo-intellectual writing. Same thing with his DC films. Man of Steel was a movie that I was kind of split on. I like parts of that movie. I dislike parts of that movie. BVS is a movie that I really didn't like, although I still haven't seen the Ultimate Edition, but after seeing this movie, I definitely want to. In terms of the other DC movies, I hated Suicide Squad, and I still do. I liked Wonder Woman a lot, but I thought it was a little too by the book, although I still respect the hell out of that movie, and I really loved Patty Jenkins' direction of the film, and Gal Gadot as this character is perfect. The theatrically released Justice League, or more commonly known as Justice League, was a complete joke of a film with no real vision and just smashed together horribly. It's so clear that it was just made in a studio boardroom garbage, and I can tell you, I just had a really rough time watching that one. It was just so generic and just ugh. Aquaman was kind of mediocre, but I adored Shazam and Birds of Prey. Those two have been the big smash hits of the DCEU as far as I'm concerned. So when I found out Zack Snyder's Justice League was finally going to be finished and see the light of day, I had a lot of thoughts about it. I was excited for all of the fans that weren't toxic, who fought for this movie's release, but I didn't think I was going to like it, honestly. I thought at the very least it was going to be better than the theatrical cut. So, was it? Yes. Yes, by miles, and it was so much more than just being better than the theatrical cut. Zack Snyder's Justice League is the Zack Snyder movie that I have been waiting for. Does it still have some of the Snyderisms? Yeah, the slow motion, the sometimes underwhelming color palette, it's all here. But the pseudo-intellectual dialogue, nearly non-existent. The edginess is toned down a lot, although it is present in some instances. And for the first time in a Snyder film, for me at least, it has a heart. A beating heart with themes of family and togetherness in a way that I legitimately never expected from him. So many scenes in this movie genuinely warmed my heart. It kind of caught me off guard at times. I was like, this is the Snyder Cut? I was not expecting this at all. I was so pleasantly surprised by this movie and so happy watching nearly every single frame of this film. We actually get to see these characters be heroes, and it was really nice. Also, to the hardcore Snyder fans, the people that really love Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman, there are moments in this movie that are made for you. One moment in particular actually made me tear up, which is something I did not expect. I teared up for a couple of reasons, because the first thing that came to my mind was like, oh my god, the people who love Man of Steel are going to love this specific scene. And I won't talk about it, but you guys are going to love it. I promise you. One of my biggest concerns going to this film was the runtime. I was afraid the film was going to feel very bloated and poorly paced and have a lot of narrative plot lines that were all over the place. But surprisingly and thankfully, it wasn't, and Snyder utilizes the runtime perfectly. Not a second for the most part, I'll get into it later, is wasted. I fully understood each character's motivations, who they were, and why they were. Even frickin' Steppenwolf, I don't know how you say it, I apologize. But even Steppenwolf has, like, a character. You kind of understand him a bit more. In the theatrical cut, he's just kind of like, oh, I'm this big bad guy that conquers things. But in this movie, you actually get a little bit of backstory to him, which is really nice. It's not a lot. I wish there was maybe a little bit more, but I still really liked what they did with Steppenwolf in this movie. And I wouldn't have properly understood these characters if Zack didn't properly set the film up. But he did. Another thing I really loved in this movie was the action. Now, this isn't surprising because Snyder is known for this, but this is the action filmmaking that I have been wanting and waiting for Snyder to do in the DC universe. It's not like Man of Steel action where it's just shaky cam everywhere, and it's not like BVS action where it just feels kind of boring. This action is big, it's epic, shot and framed to near perfection. The action, and the movie as a whole to be honest, is elevated by Tom Hulkenberg, or more commonly known as Junkie XL's score. It has a lot of different sounds, styles, and influences that are used perfectly, with the exception of one track in one scene which felt kind of out of place and it just was really weird, but it'll only last for like a couple seconds, so it's not like a huge deal. The tracks in this film really fit the tone and style that Zack is going for perfectly. Now, if you've watched a few Zack Snyder films, you know his action isn't the only trademark of his. The other half of Snyder's style is his visuals, and they are top-notch in Justice League. Oftentimes, Zack tells full stories with little to no dialogue being spoken, and I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. I try to do that stuff in my own filmmaking. His visuals paired with great performances gave me some of my favorite scenes in the film. And once again, a remarkable score and frenetic sound design elevate these scenes. My only real complaint is at times the color palette and lighting can be kind of annoying and underlit. Thankfully though, it's not nearly as egregious as Batman vs. Superman, in my opinion. Here's something I didn't expect as a skeptic. This movie now made me understand Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman more. Through watching this film, I really started to understand the places that Snyder wanted to take these characters on an emotional level. Even if I'm still not the biggest fan of those two movies, which I'm not, I think I can at least understand the arc and story Zack was going on in the first place. To me, Man of Steel is an apathetic film about letting go of failure, and Clark letting go of his connection to Krypton. BVS is this pessimistic movie about division and falling from the light, and we see that in Bruce's fall to darkness and how that affects him. And Justice League is an optimistic, hopeful, truly heartfelt story about unity, family, and heroism of all kinds, whether it be a small act of kindness or a Kryptonian punching a space demon in the face. In terms of the criticisms that I have, which I do have a couple, sometimes the editing made little to no sense. Sometimes we would be in one scene and then it would cut to another scene for seemingly no reason, and then a few seconds later it would cut to something else. It was weird. But I could understand if the scenes at least correlated together. Actually, in one point in the film, the movie does the same technique, but it's cutting between two scenes that correlate with each other, and he intercuts between those scenes beautifully. But when it was bad, it really dragged the pacing down a couple of times in the film that already had a runtime that was working against it. But as I've said, 80% of the time, the pacing is close to perfect, for me personally. I will say, for some people, there's a lot of exposition in there, especially in that first half of the film, so that could definitely drag it down for some people, but personally, it wasn't the biggest issue for me. The last problem I have with this film is the ending, and again, no spoilers, don't worry, but I feel like this ending dragged on a bit too long. There was a point where I thought the film was going to end, and I thought that was the perfect spot, but it just kept going on and on. And the tone of the stuff that's in the ending is so entirely different that it really didn't work with the rest of the film, which is rather consistent in its tone. To me, the ending section just had no reason to be there, in my opinion, especially considering we most likely won't be getting sequels to this movie. I hope I'm wrong about that, for the record. There were other characters in this film that I just wish had more time in the film. It's kind of frustrating in that way. And again, a lot of people were building this movie up to be a certain way, and they might be disappointed, but you have to remember that this film was supposed to be part 1 of 3 in a series of films. Essentially, it was meant to be Zack Snyder's Lord of the Rings epic. And again, I'm not going to say which characters specifically lacked scenes that I was hoping there would be more of them, because again, no spoilers, obviously. So my advice to people is to go into this thinking critically about what the film is and not what you want it to be. I mean, that's just a general critical thing that I think people should take into all movies. But look at this film as its own thing, and I think you can really appreciate it. I think if Warner Brothers doesn't greenlight a Justice League 2 and 3, which apparently there are rumors that they might, Zack should get together with some comic artists and just make one big graphic novel omnibus that would essentially contain part 2 and 3, what they would have been. I would really love that, and that way Zack can go as crazy as he wants without fear of studio interference again. I would buy that day one, personally. I would really, really love to see him do that. At the end of the day, Zack Snyder's Justice League was a movie that I did not expect to like, but came out loving it. It addressed a lot of my issues that I had with Snyder's filmmaking in the past, and it added more heart than I ever thought possible from him. To the hardcore Snyder fans, you will most likely adore this movie if you set your expectations right. To the skeptics like me, I say give it a shot, and you might find yourself really liking Snyder's vision. So if I had to give a review score for this movie, I'm going to give Zack Snyder's Justice League a very solid and strong 8 out of 10. One last thing before we go, guys. On a bit more of a serious note, aside from the film and everything, I do want to say that this was all for Autumn. In an interview, Zack talked about how she was the reason, aside from the fan outcry, she was the main reason he came back to finish this movie. At its core, this movie was for his daughter Autumn, and I just wanted to pay my respects here at the end. As someone who has struggled with anxiety and depression and suicide at a point in my life, I wanted to sit here and pay my respects to her and tell you all, if anybody out there is feeling a specific way, I want you to know that you're not alone. I know it sounds cliche, but you are not alone. And people go through it all the time, and it sucks. But you can get through it. You can, and suicide is not the answer. And if you are feeling that way, I encourage you to call the hotline. And if you aren't feeling that way and you just want to donate towards the cause, I left a ASFP link in the description. So if you want to go ahead and donate to that, it's a great organization, and I highly recommend you do. All right, take care, everybody, and rest in peace, Autumn Snyder.